Hi, my name is Rosie Blake and this is my video essay on stop motion animation. So, what is stop motion? Stop motion animation, or another name for it, stop frame animation, is a technique used in animation that is captured one frame at a time. This is done by physical objects that are moved in between the frame to create the illusion that the static objects are being brought to life. When the frames are played back in sequence, it shows movement. Stop motion animation is really very popular. You see it used all the time in adverts, music videos, television shows, and in feature films. Clay figures, puppets, and miniatures are often used in stop motion animation as they can be handled and repositioned easily. Although other animation techniques include object animation and cutout animation. Object animation is the oldest and one of the most widely used stop motion techniques. It is when you use simple objects to create the animation. For example, an animator might use a child's rubber duck instead of a detailed chicken model with movable body parts. This technique is extremely time-consuming, however, has enabled animation to grow successfully to today, where it is now a big Hollywood honeypot. Stop motion started off years and years ago, and it is also as old as film itself. Filmmakers needed a way to bring animate objects on screen, and it was thanks to J. Stuart Blackson and Albert E. Smith, who was pictured on the left, for bringing a toy circus to life in the Humpty Dumpty Circus in 1898. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the real video, however this clip pays homage to their work, showing the show-nut Humpty Dumpty Circus. As you can see, the clip shows object animation by simply twisting the objects round and having them do silly tricks. It is visually entertaining and the technique is clear and simple. You can actually see the jumps in between frames, which demonstrates the early adaptation of stop motion animation. Another early example of stop motion or stop action animation was Fun in a Bakery Shop, a 1902 film by Edwin S. Porter. The 80-second film was a combination of stop action photography and object manipulation. In a summary, a baker's assistant throws a handful of dough at a rat. The dough sticks to the side of a barrel and the assistant proceeds to sculpt the dough into various faces and shapes. There is some experimental use of stop motion here and some smooth edits between freezes. Pioneers. This leads me on to the following topic I'll be discussing, which are the pioneers of animation. I'll be looking over some of their work and demonstrating the discovery of the persistence of vision in moving image. British photographer Edward Muybridge was born in Kingston-upon-Thames in 1830. Though his work isn't animation, his animal studies are amongst the earliest visual experiments with moving images. It was an 1872 Californian government debate on when, if a horse gallops, are all four of its hooves off the ground simultaneously, that got Muybridge working to settle the question. To capture this, a series of large cameras using glass plates were placed in a line, each triggered by a thread as the horse passed. He paired that with a clockwork device. The images were then copied as silhouettes onto a disc. In 1877, Muybridge finally settled the government's question. His project was called The Horse in Motion. It was a single photographic negative showing a racehorse in midst of a gallop, completely airborne. Muybridge then went on to project the images from the rotating disc in great succession, producing a moving image. This was the creation of the zoopraxiscope. After the success of photographing the racehorse, Muybridge exploited the optical toy known as the zoetrope, in which strips of his photographs were rotated round in the cylinder. However, he had been moderating his projector so that it operated in conjunction with a shutter and glass disc. This worked on the principle of another device, the phenascotoscope. As the disc spun round in the opposite direction to the shutter, painted transcriptions of Muybridge's photographs on its surface were projected quickly one after the other, in the process becoming reanimated to create short sequences of movement. Muybridge christened his invention the zoopraxiscope, meaning animal action viewer. Though still a long way from modern cinema, this was one of the most earliest examples of projected motion pictures. A technique that was developed in the period of early animation was persistence of vision. Persistence of vision is a theory of the human eye having the illusion of an afterimage still persisting. We don't notice the fractional skips between images because that persistence fills in the momentary gap to make the motion seem seamless. Persistence of vision works because the human eye and brain can only process 10 to 12 separate images per second, retaining an image for up to a 15th of a second. For example, in this modern clip, a simple plastic ball looks purple until it is spun in a circle. Inside the ball are 3 LED lights which are red, green and blue, which turn on and off in sequence very quickly. The colours only show when the ball is spun because when still, the brain doesn't refresh quickly enough to perceive all the colours at once. They unmerge when spun and the ball's true nature is revealed. Persistence of vision can be explained through the Lumiere brothers' work. The Lumiere brothers, Auguste and Louis, were born sons of the famous painter Anton Lumiere. They were both very technical-minded and attended a science school. When Anton quit art for his passion for photography, the brothers started working for their dad as photography manufacturers. The brothers earned success after they were selling their own experimental photography dry plate process in 1881 called Etiquette Bleu. It gave the father's company a huge boost, and he was then invited to a demonstration of Edison's peephole kinetoscope in Paris. Anton presented the kinetoscope film to the brothers and told them to make it themselves. The original Edison model sold for extreme high prices, but the concessionaires at the time were trying to make lots of films in Paris to have them cheaper. By early 1895, the brothers had invented their own device combining a camera with a printer and a projector and called it the cinematograph. It was a lot smaller than Edison's kinetograph and had 16 frames per second. This meant that less film was used, and it also reduced a lot more noise than Edison's model had. The Lumiere brothers then went on to make films using the cinematograph, and it was then that persistence of vision was shown through motion. The brothers' first reverse motion picture, Demolition of a Wall, in 1996, shows persistence in vision as the men try and break down the building. In particular, you can see this when the brick wall collapses, creating an optical illusion. Another example, also by the Lumiere brothers, is the train arriving at the train station. This again demonstrated the scientific theory using projection and filming apparatus. When the film was first shown, the audience ran to the back of the room in horror as they were so overwhelmed with a life-size train coming towards them. The Lumiere brothers clearly know that this effect would be dramatic if they placed the camera on the platform very close to the arriving train. Another significant aspect of the film is that it illustrates the use of a long shot to establish the setting of the film, followed by a medium shot and then a close-up. Developers. After the time period of pioneers, animation started to develop further, and people were finding more ways to improve their work. The techniques that were being worked on more closely were the frame rates of stop motion. In addition to that, the improvement on the movement of models. Willis O'Brien was a master of animation and helped inspire current animators today. He is known for spending years of his life developing rather innovative techniques. He was born as a native Californian in Oakland. O'Brien's winding artistic road began in his teens, working briefly as a cowboy, boxer, and cartoonist. He then discovered a love for sculpturing, working on mainly animals and humans. He would add moulded rubber to their surfaces, giving his pieces both character and freedom of movement. If he was working a long shift, O'Brien and his co-worker proceeded to use the clay for his sculptures and created short sketches, for example, a boxing match. Throughout the play, stop motion was becoming more and more apparent in O'Brien's mind, and little did everyone know that it would grow into years of collected knowledge, showcasing in his best accomplishment, Kong. He soon caught the attention of important figures, for example Edison, who hired him to produce a sequence of prehistoric short films. He used mainly clay in his early pieces, for example this clip of the dinosaur and the missing link. It was produced in 1915 and was O'Brien's first stop-motion animation film. As you can see, the models look lifelike, and the use of moving limbs and early special effects have been used. The curl on the dinosaur's tail is really effective as it shows O'Brien's creativity to have something appear more realistic. As both his career and skills grew, so did the intricacy of his models. Complex articulated armatures covered with rubber skins would dominate the models Willis would build and design. Some of O'Brien's designs even included a rubber bladder that allowed his creatures to breathe. By inflating and deflating the bladder, his creations could fight, move, and give the appearance of breathing, stirring both our fears and imaginations. This shows thorough improvement on the movement in models in this time period. O'Brien was doing things that no other animator was doing. Soon after, O'Brien started research on his film Kong. To develop his portrayal of the film, O'Brien visited zoos to study the gorillas' movements. Likewise, he would attend wrestling matches to observe their interactions and improve the choreography of his creatures' battles. This attention to detail, coupled with his own life experiences, is what set O'Brien's work apart from the rest. At a mere 18 inches high, Kong's rich character coupled a new style of rear projection film effects that left the audience thrilled and amazed, exceeding all previous types of film. This new style of metal armature with ball and socket joints was built up using foam and covered with rabbit fur. It was shot one frame at a time to create the illusion of life. Though largely a technical process, the success of Kong's stemmed from O'Brien's ability to give a lifeless puppet a personality which audiences were able to identify with. You cannot talk about the developments of modern stop animation without mentioning the work of Lotte Ranger. Born in 1899, the German creator has got her name on over 40 animated films between the 1910s and the 1970s. She is mostly recognisable for her enchanting shadow puppetry. Her hypnotic films were excellently crafted out of snippets of card and wire and animated by hand. She has influenced generations of filmmakers and artists. Her work was mostly inspired by combinations of both performance and storytelling. Ranger has also made one of the world's first animated features, a whirlwind of a fantasy film called The Adventures of Prince Ahmed in 1926, which you can see on screen now. As a young woman and keen to work with Paul Wegener, an idol of hers, she found a job designing silhouettes for the titles of his films. Although her first step into the world of animation began in his film The Pied Piper of Hamelin in 1918, Wegener found it hard to control real rats and guinea pigs on set, so hired Lotte to task this with animating wooden rats in stop-motion style. In the following years, Ranger collaborated with several artists, including her husband, making some incredible short films. However, was discovered by a man called Louis Hagen, who gave the young artist a chance to try her hand at the broader canvas of a feature film. And so then she made her enchanting The Adventures of Prince Ahmed. It is a wonderful film full of charming comedy, lyrical romance, battle scenes, and truly sinister, frightening evil. The images move faster than they should, as was filmed in 18 frames per second, which is a silent speed compared to the more common 2's approach, with 24 frames per second, which is a sound speed. This speed adds to the exciting suspense of the film and made it Lotte's best piece of work. Lotte made many adaptations of fairy tales, a dozen of them. Her 1955 animation of Thumbelina is one of her most known pieces of work. The sharp crispness and intricacy of her black, scissored figures combined with a fluid, bouncing animation. As soon as you think you've spotted a join or seen the technique behind the movement, the scene changes, another transformation occurs, and the picture has been reformed again. The cutouts are often backed with jewel-like colours, so the impression is of visual richness rather than the stark monochrome. This is so effective and shows how much complexity went into her work. Ranger made puppet animation come to life and combined that with developing the frame rates of that time with super smooth animation. Contemporary work. The pioneers and developers of animation has helped structure how we see animation today. Through the years, it has definitely improved. I will now be talking about the work of today's most respected animators of this generation. Timothy Walter Burton was born in Burbank, California in 1958. He studied at the California Institution of Arts and left having majored in animation. As a child, Burton became obsessed with watching horror films, in particular classic horror films by Roger Corman. By this age, he was already into drawing. Now he combines both passions into his infamous gothic dark fantasy films. Burton realised at college that the three-dimensional aspect of stop-motion animation is what he loved. He knew he loved the idea of the characters appearing more realistic. Burton was compelled to utilise stop-motion animation because it could bring something purely imagined to vivid life in a way that 2D animation couldn't. For his first directorial endeavour as an apprentice at Walt Disney, Burton chose to film his 1982 Vincent short film. Using his beloved technique, he brought this puppet to life as a little bored suburban boy who dreams of being a mad scientist. Burton used quite complex models with detailed textures. For example, Burton has combined his love for horror into this young boy's imagination. The effect of this technique has now become iconic of Burton, as controversial models paired with an early love for making animations appear more realistic, and the help of puppet movement is what made Burton so successful. The release of The Nightmare Before Christmas in 1993 brought stop-motion animation back to the forefront. Its success proved that audiences would still respond to this age-old medium, even in the face of new, wondrous computer-animated films. In total, there were 109,404 frames taken for the film, and it was shot in 24 frames per second, so the animators had to create unique motions for the films. As you can see from the trailer, it has Burton's infamous touch. People found it hard to believe it was a Disney film. The visual style, the atmosphere, and the music made for a great movie. It was the first time that stop motion was really loved by all, including both parents and children. Burton knew he had a great target audience for families in stop motion animation, so he released Corpse Bride in 2005. Keeping true to his love for stop motion, the filmmakers only got about 2 or 3 minutes a week of work. It was made with digital cameras, and which enabled the film to look stunningly smooth. They shot the same scene on every camera and experimented with different frame rates to choose from. They experimented with both 2s and 4ths, meaning shooting just every second or 4th frame of what would appear in the final animation. It really does show the work that goes into stop motion, and it made the film unique and stands out from the rest. It flows so fluidly, and you can see the improvement in the persistence of vision. The puppets move and appear just like humans do, which shows a great improvement in the movement of models and how technology can help create realism to animated objects. Aardman Animations is a British animation studio based in Bristol in South England. Aardman is famously known for making stop-motion clay animation techniques, in particular plasticine characters, for example Wallace and Gromit. Peter Lord and David Sproxton began their animating passion at school. In 1972 they founded Aardman Animations. 4 years later they moved to Bristol and began working on their first professional production, creating morph characters for the children's show called Take Heart. At the start of their career they worked for a more older audience and their conversation pieces, which allowed them to animate puppet characters to real-life conversations. Their film Early Bird suggested that real people could be characterised with insight, humour and sensitivity. We also see Aardman experiment with puppet animation, which is a different alternative to their famous clay animations. The clip on the screen now is an example of puppet animation. It was done by an intern at Aardman Animations, and he had 3 weeks to put together a puppet stop-motion animation. He used one of the puppets left over from the film Pirates, and as you can see, it flows really well, and the use of the puppet is good as you can move the limbs and make it more lifelike, just like humans. In 1986, they collaborated with director Stephen Johnson and the Quay brothers to create a new rock video, Sledgehammer. It was a huge success and collected almost every award that year. It was a great combination of rhythm, energy and visual flair and style. The music video contains some of the famous plasticine model faces that we as an audience familiarise ourselves with today. The video used various techniques, for example stop motion through photographs and object animation. In 1989, the studio was commissioned by Channel 4 Television. In 1990, Aardman teamed up with Nick Park and created Creature Comforts, which were talking animals and set the whole nation into hysterics. Aardman have continued to work with Nick Park in producing 1993 The Wrong Trousers and A Close Shave in 1995. This was another huge milestone for the pair and enabled them to turn Wallace and Gromit into a household name. Chicken Run in 2000 was Aardman's first full-length theatrical feature film to be funded by DreamWorks. It showed off Aardman's fantastic animation skills and opened up a whole new audience of children. Aardman model makers made 2 scales of each chicken called A-scale chickens and B-scale chickens. The A-scale chickens were the larger ones and were used in scenes that required interaction. Meanwhile, the B-scale chickens, the smaller ones, were used for distance perspective and to make the human characters appear much larger. Each chicken had up to 60 different beaks to properly recreate vowel and consonant sounds for realistic talking. Like the chickens, the humans had a series of detachable mouths to properly recreate speech patterns. Each chicken run was shot at 24 frames per second, so for just 10 seconds of film there were 240 frames. 24 frames per second is the most common frame rates used in professional animation projects. It is referred to as shooting on twos, and you can see it looks fine and smooth, takes less time to animate, and there is an extra frame rate in case one of the frames gets screwed. Wallace and Gromit are perhaps Aardman's most famous characters. They have very distinctive faces and pull facial expressions which we associate with the characters. Aardman's choice of models adds humour, and us as an audience can easily tell just by their faces that we are watching an Aardman animation. 2005's The Curse of the Were-Rabbit was Wallace and Gromit's first feature film, once again released by DreamWorks, and claimed massive success. The success of the film made it to the US and features the voice of international stars Helena Bonham Carter and Ralph Fiennes. It took 5 years to make. Aardman proved that stop-motion animation is an effective way of bringing a cartoon to life. Stop motion is often described as pain-striking. However, the technique has now fooled the whole world as we still continue to make these animations. Stop-motion animation, as we all know, is a fantastic creation. In present day, animation presents itself in a variety of different genres and forms. In cinema, stop-motion has made its way to Hollywood, and some of the best films, for example Coraline and Fantastic Mr. Fox, have become box office sellers. It's amazing to think that something that started out so small has become so successful. There have been a huge improvement in technology over the past few decades, and now we are seeing stop-motion in not just short films, but in adverts, channel idents, and music videos. This is because modern technology allows us to film things like stop-motion music videos, stop-motion channel idents, and the fact that we know more about it, we're educated, and we have the money, we have the technology, and we have the skills in order to produce things. Technology has opened up a whole world to social media, and it's through the media that platforms can share their stop-motion. And I hope when I'm older it will still be just as important as it is today.